Hey y'all, Chantel Speaks here. Welcome back to season 2. I am so grateful to be in the space today with a legend, Brother Ron Chisom. He is the founder, co founder, and emeritus executive director of People's Institute for Survival and Beyond. So thank you, Brother Ron, Dr. Ron now, because you just received your honorary degree from University of Maryland. Thank you for being here today.
It's good to be here. Good to be here.
Straight out of New Orleans, Louisiana.
That's right.
Yes. So, Chantel Speaks is a faith-based podcast, and but we also talk about social justice and lifestyle, entertainment, all of the things. And so, Ron, I want to tell y'all a little bit about the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond. So I'm gonna read a little bit. The People's Institute for Survival was founded in 1980 by Dr. Jim Dunn and Ron Chisom, an organization for training and equipping effective community organizers who work with humanistic and anti-racist principles for social change. PSIAB has dedicated to training community organizers from an anti-racist approach, not from an issues or campaign type approach. It will build on lessons learned from other organizing models, particularly those led and inspired by Saul Alinsky. But the People's Institute will state without apology that racism is the key barrier to social equity in the United States and must be the foundational understanding of those who want to make effective social change. So we're going to talk about that, your relationship with Saul Alinsky, how you got started, and all of the things. Since 1980, the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond have trained over 2 million people through its 2.5-day Undoing Racism workshop all over the United States and other parts of the world. Today, there are more than 100 trainer organizers steeped in organizing in their own communities and facilitating a process of social change wherever they are organized and invited to do so. And so I have my name tag on because I am just coming from my third Undoing Racism workshop. And so we're also grateful to have some of those organizers that organize that here in Austin and trainers from People Institute. So thank y'all for being here too as well. So, Dr. Ron, and I affectionately call you Grandpa Ron because when I met you in New Orleans, it was just instantaneously love from you and Dr. Kim, and shout out to Dr. Kim because she's a GOAT as well, longtime trainer and currently the executive director of People's Institute for Survival and Beyond. How long or how did you get started in organizing?
Well, first of all, Chantel, I'm glad to be here. To spend some time with you and in your community is exciting for me, and to know the work that you're doing is exciting. And for me, I've been doing this work a long time, and what got me to do this work was that I'm from New Orleans, Louisiana, and if anybody ever been to New Orleans, they know something about the French Quarters, but they also need to know something about one of the oldest black neighborhoods in the United States called Treme, Treme. There was an HBO series where we talk about the culture of New Orleans, and we talked about Katrina. And I was fortunate to be in one of those HBO series with this actor, Wendell Pierce.
Nice.
And being in New Orleans and working in that community, I was at the time trying to make a difference in my community. Didn't know what organizing was, but I was doing organizing.
Yeah.
I was bringing people together in the Treme community to deal with some of the injustice of fighting slum landlords and environmental racism and police brutality and just an array of issues. So as I was organizing folks, never thought about training, just thought about helping people.
Yeah.
What I realized after a couple of years of doing this work, before we started the People's Institute, every time I would bring folks in my community together, primarily all black folks, we'd go to City Hall and challenge some of the politicians, and we'd have a good fight with them. Then we'd come back home and we began to fight with each other. So I didn't understand that dynamics, and that kept happening. And so eventually I said, maybe since I was the one organizing people, maybe if I got better in doing my job, I could stop the internal fighting. So I went and got trained by a man named Saul Alinsky and in Chicago, a place called Midwest Academy, where they teach you how to deal with group dynamics, tactical research, and systemic issues. So I learned so much there. And when I came back from this training, I realized that if I'm going to be, well, they gave me a lot of great skills. And what I realized, if you give somebody some skills and they don't deal with their racism, they can become a skillful racist. So I realized if I'm going to be now it didn't stop the internal fighting, but it gave me much better prepared to work with my community. So I began to realize if I'm going to be effective, well, first of all, I met a brother named Dr. Jim Dunn, who was out of Yellow Springs, Ohio, another black man that was doing community organizing, was teaching community organizing. So we got together in New York, and I met him in New York, and we began to build a relationship. We started learning from each other. And then he told me if I'm going to be effective as an organizer, again, he was teaching organizing, community organizing, that I must understand racism. And I thought as a black man, I knew all about racism, but I knew it as being a victim. I didn't know it from a systemic understanding. And so, as I said, when I met Jim Dunn, he told me the importance that we have to understand the dynamics of racism to become a good organizer. Then that's when we started the Institute in 1980.
Right.
And we said, we believe Jim Dunn, if something was done, it can be undone. We also say we're part of a movement. The reason why Jim Dunn and I could do what we're doing, somebody opened the doors for us to be there. We can never forget that.
Right.
And that's what the Institute is based on. And so we began to, in 1980, start the Institute. We began to start doing trainings all over the country. And but that's what got me motivated to be involved, is that I wanted to bring this training to my community, because it's not enough just to help people, which is important, but to make sure they got an analysis on how racism has divided us in our communities. So that's what really got me off the ground.
That's good. Thank you. I'm so excited to hear that, because I've been through the Midwest Academy training. So to know that that's how you first learned as well is hopeful for me, because again, that's where it all started. But when I came to the Undoing Racism workshop, that opened up a larger light of, being able to organize with knowing, the internalized racial superiority that you may be experiencing, or even inferiority that you may be feeling. You talked about Treme, and you also talked about Dr. Jim Dunn. First, okay, so I have here in my notes, right? Treme Community Improvement Association won several significant Louisiana victories in New Orleans. And you had a legal suit between you and the governor of Louisiana, Romare, so Chisom versus Romare. When you challenged the Louisiana Supreme Court to achieve equal representation for the predominantly black neighborhood in New Orleans, was this before the People's Institute was founded, or was it in the middle?
It was kind of in the middle of it,
Okay.
As I remember, because in Louisiana, we never had any black state Supreme Court justice. Every time somebody in a black community would try to run for state Supreme Court, which is the highest position you can get in the state. Right. And when you got to go to court, you see nobody look like you, it creates a problem.
Yeah.
So a group of lawyers, one was Mark Muriel, who's now head of Urban League, and an attorney named William Quigley, called me in one day and said, we'd like for you to be the chief plaintiff in this case. Well, I'm not a lawyer. I know a lot about law, but I was a paralegal at one point, and I worked with a lot of lawyers. And they asked me, would I be the chief plaintiff? And so I did, and I took, under the Voting Rights Act, you can appoint somebody to that position, but they still have to run for that office. But I took this to U.S. Supreme Court, and the U.S. Supreme Court eventually ruled in my favor. Right. And this particular legislation affects every state in the country. It's called Chisom versus the governor. And so different people who are trying to run for those positions can learn how to do this through this particular case. And but I was excited about it because there was a strong black woman in that role, Judge Bernadette Johnson. And she, after a period of time, she became the Chief Justice, which means she became the boss of the present judges, who were pretty much all white men. And she became their boss. And that created some more problems. But she served her time well. She retired from it. And I'm just honored to be part of that history.
Yes, that was dope. I didn't know that, but when I was looking down you all's website, that's when I found out about it. And then I Googled you.
Yeah.
And it said some other stuff like, what was it, the U.S. Supreme Court, then they ruled against it.
Right.
But you also have, don't give me the line, because I didn't put it in my notes, but it's called the Chisom, it's not the Chisom Civil Rights Act, but there is an act in your name
Yeah.
Where they cannot, discriminate against race when it comes to the Louisiana, the
particular bill, yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
So, Grandpa Ron, where did the Beyond come from? Because it wasn't an originally named People's Institute for Survival and Beyond. Where did the Beyond?
The first year we started, the name was the People's Institute for Survival.
Mm-hmm.
And after about a year that we realized, it took us a while it clicked in our head. See, when we meet folks in our community and we talk to them, they say, yeah, man, I'm trying to survive. And what we realized, if we're going to be effective, we got to get people to think beyond surviving. Mm-hmm. So eventually we added beyond on it. We said, if they're going to internalize something, it shouldn't be survival, it should be the beyond piece. So we call ourselves the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond. And that's a different approach to take, because we're tired of surviving. Right. We got to get beyond that,
Yeah, I definitely have an affinity towards beyond because, it's more than just the moment. We have to think about the future as well while honoring the moment.
That's correct.
So I have some, Brother Rob is one of my good friends.
Yeah.
He was the one that, organized us to come down to New Orleans. And so I asked him, I was like, what's your question? What's your question for Brother Ron? And so he said he wanted to know, what is the difference from legacy and leadership? Now, we're going to talk about anti-racist principles and anti-racism as well, but we wanted to ask you, what is the difference between legacy and leadership? Because you're retired, but you're still working.
Right. Well, I don't know if it's either or. I think it's both.
Okay.
You leave things you've done. I don't know if you leave them, but you've done things in the past, and you try to not only make it like a legacy that's in the past, try to make it a live legacy. Mm-hmm. Leadership is done all the time. Leadership is, so I think they're together. I don't know if you can separate it. I don't know if it's an either or, kind of called dichotomous thinking. Yeah. I think it's all together right now.
Right.
But they're both crucial because during the legacy time, I was developing leadership, and presently I'm developing leadership. So to me, it's one.
Thank you.
So let Brother Rob know that. Tell him I don't separate, and I'm glad I'm still around to be able to live some of that legacy, but also I'm around to keep developing leadership.
Yes, he will definitely watch this.
Yeah.
And so you didn't answer. So how old are you?
I'm 83.
You're 83 years young.
Yeah.
Happy.
Right.
When is your birthday?
July 5th. Get ready to do 84, and I got another month, and I'm excited about it. And also I've been married for 60 years too. I have 2 grandkids, and my daughter is also administrative director of the institute.
Yeah.
And she plays a big role with Dr. Kim, who's the executive director.
Nice.
So I tell people I'm not old, I'm seasoned.
Right.
With a flavor.
Facts.
Yeah.
You definitely have flavor.
Yeah,
I experienced that
yeah,
and
yeah.
watched that. And shout out to Dawa Studios for this space. The owner is walking through, so we want to just shout them out. Thank y'all so much. They have been definitely, Brother Ron, Dr. Ron has, and everybody here has been saying how beautiful this space is. So we want to
Yeah.
just take a quick break to just thank Dawah Studios for this space.
Yeah, we've been in a lot of studios, and it is something different.
Yeah,
And when we walked in from outside, we felt the energy.
yeah,
Because a couple of my colleagues who are sitting out there now does some similar work. And as soon as all three of us walked in here, we could feel a good energy in the room. And I'm saying that very seriously.
good.
So,
Thank you.
so whatever the flavor they put together, you could feel it.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. Speaking of Austin, and this is where I'm from. What do you like about Austin? Because you've been everywhere. You've been all over the world.
Yeah.
What is this something you've been here frequently to do undoing racism workshops? What is it that you like about Austin?
Because I've seen many people fighting for justice in Austin. I don't know. I've been around Rock. I've been different places, but I've been throughout the state of Texas.
Yeah.
And we were blessed to work with a lady named Joyce James, who's a black woman commissioner over Child Protection Services. And she started bringing us in to do work here, and we had an opportunity to work in every part of the state of Texas. I mean, all over. And what I noticed, in spite of its challenges, in spite of some of the setbacks we got, a lot of people are organizing. A lot of people are fighting. And there's a lot of presentation of black and Latinos doing a lot of fighting. And there are many white people also in that mix as well, trying to make a difference. So I just see there's a certain culture about Austin. There's a certain flavor here that compared to a lot of other places. Like I've lived in Houston for 3 years, and I've been around Dallas for a while. But there's something about this particular community, and I say it's so large. I don't know it well, but the chance I've been coming up here, I've seen so many organizers and leaders and a lot of organizations, and I've been blessed to meet them and work with them. And many of the folks from Austin have visited New Orleans. And so, as a matter of fact, we have a meeting on Friday. with many organizations who have been to our workshop.
Yeah.
And one of the purposes of bringing all these groups together throughout Austin is to talk about the importance of having a united front
Right.
to deal with some of the injustice that's presently going on in this country right now. We can do our separate thing, we can do our nonprofit thing, but periodically we got to come together as a collective to show the system that we're united and that we got some power. So that's one of the reasons we're meeting here in Austin. And Austin has the potential to make that happen.
That's right. Thank you. So speaking of the workshop Undoing Racism, we have anti-racist principles.
Right.
To be an anti-racist organizer. So I'm gonna read some of those off to y'all. Analyzing power, developing leadership, gatekeeping, identifying and analyzing manifestations of racism, learning from history, maintaining accountability, networking, sharing culture, undoing internalized racial oppression. And so I myself encourage anyone, if you have not done this workshop, to complete this workshop. It's a 3-day workshop. It's an analysis, and it is life-changing. It's uncomfortable sometimes for some people, but it is definitely life-changing. Like I said, I've done it multiple times, and I learn every time. I was stating today, how I struggle with gatekeeping, the positive part of gatekeeping, and then just also learning more about the internalized racial oppression, whether it's superiority or inferiority. But I also love how they share the culture, like they have culture space there, so folks can share about their culture and their experiences. But it's very awesome, and PISAB.org. PISAB.org. If you want to check them out, please do. But you stated today, you said, we have to shift our way of thinking, right? And there's this historical divide. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Well, I'm saying is that if we're going to be effective in doing this work, we got to understand we've been conditioned, we've been socialized, we've been programmed not to think critically.
Yeah.
So whether we start an organization, whatever we start, if we want to, and we have a commitment to make real changes, you got to understand the system don't want us to think critically. They want us just to make a motion and go around in a circle. So we're saying that you really got to, if we want to really make real changes, you got to stretch your mind. You know, you got to stimulate those muscles inside of our head. And for me, as an organizer, that's what I'm an organizer, and I'm very hopeful. I'm very encouraged, and I'm also a leader. I'm a leader and I'm an organizer. You have to know how to differentiate the two. Mm-hmm. You know, some people think I'm just an organizer. No, I can be all of it. I can be a leader. I can be an organizer. Right. And to me, an organizer is bringing people together for a purpose and intent. A leader is someone that they have people that can follow them, but they also, a good leader knows how to follow the people. Mm-hmm. But the good leadership also means you got a vision of where you're going at. You got, you can't just be leading people don't know where you're going at. So to me, I think the opportunity is here. During racism training really is to get people prepared to do a critical examination of how they're doing their work and to strengthen their work and to begin to do what we need to do right now and being effective in reaching our community and lifting our community up. And don't just talk about empowering them, help them get a sense of their power. Because many of the time our community is ready. Sometimes the leadership and the providers, we're not always ready right now. Advocacy and all those things are important, but we believe that people who do advocacy work like to do work for the people, not with the people. So we're saying you gotta work with the people. So some people don't want to do that. They think it's better to go downtown, meet with those folks downtown with two or three people. Right. We call that cliquism. You know, that ain't being effective. Right. If you're gonna, because the people downtown know you ain't got nothing behind you. So we got to show our collective strength. Sometimes it takes time to do that. Some people would rather work downtown by themselves with those folks downtown than spend quality time in building their community. Yeah. And the reason why we have a difficult time in our community, because we don't. One of the things that racism does a lot of things. What racism does, it creates a need. So we develop organizations, and we develop programs to help people with their needs, which is important. But racism also it creates an injustice. A lot of fools don't deal with injustice. They want to deal with the need. There are not many groups that want to deal with injustice. It takes time. You got to organize. You got to build your base. Right. The third thing that institutions and systems and racism does, it creates a pathology, a sickness. It gives a message to white folks that they're superior. It tells people of color we're inferior. Right. And that's what divides groups. You can bring 10 or 15 organizations together in this room right now. If we don't understand internalized oppression, we'll fight each other up. Yeah. And that's what the system wants us to do. That's why understanding racism not just an intellectual thing. The reason why we talk about racism in our work, why we talk about undoing it, because it has done something to us already. Right. It has messed us up. We're sick, there's pathology going on, and you're not going to resolve that unless you do the real kind of organizing with the principles. Yeah. See, the principles brings humanity to your work. Even though we look human, that doesn't mean we act human. Yeah. So we got, the people are ready. We just got to spend quality time. And how do you develop leadership? We call it the internal dynamics of leadership development. Some people think they can put their hand on somebody and empower them. You can't do that. But you can help the folks get a sense of their power. Right. And we ask groups all the time, how do you know if you're being effective in this work? What is the humanistic results of your work? And people think the results of your work is when white folks downtown give them a grant. That ain't no effective results. Matter of fact, sometimes they give you grants because they know you're confused. And that's just what it is. So to me, we got to spend quality time in developing our community, developing leadership. And how you know when you're developing your leadership in your community? When the people you develop start challenging you. And that's a hell of a thing. And then you got to find out if you're ready for it. Because most times we don't want people to wake up. We want to put them to sleep. So I see some of that's happening in a good way here in Austin in many ways. There are many groups that are beginning to really help people to get a sense of their power, not empower them. And that becomes your indicator. That becomes your human indicator that you're doing good work. Because most times we don't know if we're doing good work. Because we don't talk about our good work. We talk about it when we're trying to get grant money.
Yeah.
But we never talk about to each other, what's the good thing you're doing today? Like putting on this podcast, you know, having brothers and sisters in the audience that's a part of this family. That's a beautiful thing, you know. And sometimes it's hard to do this because you got to come from another part of town. You got to make sure you got some resources to do this.
Yeah.
That's why this place is a blessing right now.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and we need to get as many folks in here to come here and utilize this space. If maybe they're already using it, but we need as many as we can because we're not going to get an opportunity like this right now because they're trying to take everything from us.
Facts.
And they'll take this too if we're not ready.
Facts. Woo, you dropping gems, which
Yeah.
I knew you would.
Yeah. no, because I've been in studios and what have you, but the way they're dealing with us right now, we better make sure we with the community because that's only going to save us from them not taking it.
Yeah.
You know, we can talk, and they see that what they're doing to the immigrant situation.
Yeah.
We got to be very careful because you know who's next.
Us.
Shit,
I said
I've heard some folks in the black community holler, yeah, well, you know, the immigrants. And I said, man, quit saying stuff like that because they just doing that because they're coming for us next.
Right.
You know, and if you don't understand that, you know, because he don't care about his own people.
Yeah.
You know, so no, I just think that this is an opportunity right now. You know, we can't get upset and what he doing, and you know, we've been preparing people to move on this right now. That's what all this undoing racism is about. Because any movement for change, whether it's the women's movement, the populist movement, the labor movement, the civil rights movement, racism stopped the movement.
Right.
This is a classical example of systemic racism when one individual can be as racist as he can, but he's supported by a Congress. That's what we call systemic racism. Right. It's a model, if you ever seen before. And what's good about it? He's been able to organize people around hate.
Yeah. Oof.
You know, he's been able to organize them around hate because he don't care about them either.
Right.
But he's using them to be that one individual, man. And
we got to organize around love.
We can't just talk about organizing in a vacuum. We got to understand, you know, it's at that time.
Yeah.
It's that time to do it, you know, and ever before, you know. And we got to wake people up in our community, and we got to detox people from the nonprofit world, who's toxic in a way, because the nonprofit is good. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of toxicity to it.
Yes.
With the way they fund, the way they structure it, the way they make us do advocacy work, but not wake people up through the advocacy work. It's toxic.
Yeah.
And we need non-profit, but initially it wasn't set up to do the right thing. It was set up to stop the movement.
Yeah.
It wasn't set up for a movement. And we got to have we're talking about a movement now.
Right.
We're not talking about just caseworkers and case managers and all that kind. We're talking about, that's important, but we're talking about a movement.
Yeah.
To counter it. We're talking about a movement. And we gotta step our game up right now. That's why, you know, that's part of the undoing.
Right. Well, that makes me feel good for not starting a nonprofit. I started Help Heal Happy LLC because I'm an emotional healing life coach, and I want to help people, right? But it's so new, and thanks to my business partner here who's helped me start that to get that going. But I want to build it out, you know, where it's like where mental health meets wellness through authenticity, healing tools, and laughter. And hopefully, you know, it'll be some type of recovery for people who have recovery issues and help them to heal and, you know, abstain or harm reduction, whatever they choose. And they can learn how to organize because it all starts there, right? You know, bringing people together because this system, this world that we live in these Americas, this system of oppression, we have to fight against that. But everything you just said just like spoke to me because it's helping me to be a better organizer, to see where I may need, where I am doing good and where I may need to be better.
A lot of nonprofits are important.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But nonprofits is only a vehicle to get your work done.
Mm-hmm.
You ain't got to have a nonprofit all your life.
Right, right.
It's only a vehicle.
Yeah.
But then we get stuck on trying to keep the infrastructure going.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only problem with it. But we need nonprofits.
Yeah.
But and nonprofits can be effective, but you got to understand it wasn't set up for that. And so if you go into it, that don't mean you shouldn't go into it, but you should go into it to make sure the history of it, so you don't get confused. So we're not saying you shouldn't be involved with nonprofit, but once you get that 501c3,
yeah, it's difficult.
you lose your mind, because now it stops you from being political, which you really can, but you have to know how to do it.
Right.
But there's a reason, and it's ironic that the 501c3 came out in 1954, Board versus Education, where big funders and government got together, because at one time we had nothing to stop us from mobilizing, fighting people. You had the Panther Party, you had all these things going on. But when they got the 501c3, folks who became activists got deactivated.
Right. And that ain't what I want to do.
Right. That's right.
But I work for a nonprofit.
Yeah.
We're not gonna name
I do
that.
too.
Yeah.
I work for a nonprofit. That's why we have to undo
Yes.
what we're saying. So you can use the nonprofit in a way to make a big difference.
Right.
The other issue that nonprofits work around issues, we call it issue syndrome. And a lot of nonprofits are modeled after white models with black folks in the organization. And what happened, we deal with things called the issues. And that's what many white people have done. Is how many issues you're working on? I'm working on 2, and I'm working on 15. In the black community, we do similar. The issue that you work on, the issues we work on, are supposed to help us develop people. But most of us work on issues to fight issues.
Right.
As long as we do that, they're going to keep us busy. But you got to use the issues. You got to use the demonstration to develop leadership. That's the purpose of issues. And you got to develop issues to not just to react to issues, but to prevent issues.
Yeah.
See, we don't prevent issues, we react to issues.
Right. And
So we got to.
That's where I feel like we're stuck at in my nonprofit, because we're reactive. And I'm all about prevention and also building leaders, right? Because that's what we talk about, anti-racist principles, is building leaders.
Right.
And so, under our leadership right now, I don't think she understands that quite yet, hasn't grasped that, but I want to be able to
That's good.
teach, right? Because what you said about organizing and how it's bringing people together for intent. So I have one special question for you.
Okay.
For all this in. So I'm preparing for a board meeting this Friday. What is your definition of a board, and how should they move? Because I have to be bold in how I speak on Friday to talk about the good and the bad.
Yeah. Well, again, not knowing too much about your board, but I've been on many boards. I've been used by board people. I've done what I call drive-by board meetings, where I go there for 1 minute, show my face, and I leave out. Most boards, most boards act like a board, with no feelings.
Right.
So to me, again, I don't know if about your board,
right.
but boards can be very important.
Yeah.
Most time boards are dealing just with fiscal responsibility. But if it's a community-based board, those board members should be responsible for letting the community know what they're doing, because they represent community on the board. Now, if that's the kind of board you have, if it's a community board, the people on that board will forget why they got there, and they'll act as individuals. See, when somebody as a black or brown person get on the board and act as an individual, they're coming out of a white model, because white dominant culture get white people to be individuals, not to be a collective. So we model the same thing on the board, instead of coming together as a family.
Right.
Not only that, nonprofits operate not as a family. They set up in these cubicles, and they got this group, and it's to keep us divided.
Right.
We're divided. So to me, if you're going to be on a board, if you're an organizer and a board is not as viable as you want, you have to use your ability to read that room, see who are many of them brothers and sisters who are ready to get some more learning.
Yeah.
And you got to get one of them, bring them to our training.
Yeah.
And we'll help with that. And then we're going to help that one board member to understand his or her organizing ability. So when they go back, that one board member can organize another board member. We can't get mad at them.
Right.
Because sometimes they're set up in a way not to be effective, you know. But if it's a black and brown board and they're working with money, they need to be careful.
Yeah.
Because it's set up to eventually they mismanage whatever. So that's why they got to be involved with their community. Because if you get any kind of money and you ain't clear what they're doing, I don't care how well you fiscally responsible. If you're black and brown, it's going to be a setup to say you mismanage, especially if you're doing real work with your organization.
Yeah.
If you're not doing real work, then you're safe. They ain't going to mess with you. They're going to let you they're going to let you continue to disorganize your community.
That's good stuff. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
This is real life. And
Yeah.
what I told y'all, this is what we're dealing with, and it's authentic. And everything you said is like what's happening right now. And like I'm willing to like just bring my base members there and represent for me, but I know that I still have to be accountable and I have to, again, speak truth. So.
Let me say one thing, that I do this work, but I don't do it by myself.
Right.
I make that real, real clear.
Yeah.
I've been working with people all my life, and my strength has been for my community.
Yeah.
I do what I do, but I was doing the same thing everybody else was doing.
Right.
But I made a commitment, because one time a good organizer can be a good manipulator.
Ooh.
There's a fine line. We got a good rap. We know how to rap, but there's a fine line. And eventually I realized I'm going to be effective. Because at the time I used to say I'm going to develop leadership, but I wasn't doing it. I was bringing people with me as numbers, but I did all the talking. The hardest job for me in a leadership role and as an organizer was to bring people with me and know how to step back. Because I used to like to be in leadership role. I loved it.
Yeah.
I said, if I'm going to be effective, I got to make sure as an organizer, and the hardest thing in the world was for me to pull back. A lot of us who do this kind of work as advocates, we say we with our community, but we like to be on the TV.
Right.
We like the limelight. Even though we don't get no grand theft money,
Yeah.
we still, that's like we a star.
Right.
Because nobody recognizes anyway. So it took me a long time to realize to pull back. That was the biggest problem. It wasn't the community trying to get together. It was me to know how to pull back and let them come further.
Yeah.
That was the most difficult for me. It took me years to get to that position. And I'm so glad that I did, because we just that's our role, you know.
Expanded. Right.
Yeah.
The work expanded. It's about the people, and that's what I always
Right.
say and keep at the forefront, because just like I missed the press conference today because it's not about that for me, right? And so, just to be transparent, I'm low key being stifled in leadership because I believe in that same thing that you said. It takes a collective.
Yeah.
If I want something to change or happen, funds, I'm going to bring in all who I know can help. And so some people in leadership may struggle with that same concept of, being in limelight or just pulling away from leadership because they love it, right? But it's about the community.
Let me say one thing, is that a lot of community groups, nonprofits, give services to people. And when they do that, they create dependency. And dependency, if you're not careful, will add to the death of that community that they're trying to give services to. It took me a long time to understand, that you gotta be, you start off being dependent, it's okay. But then you gotta eventually be independent.
Yeah.
Then ultimately interdependent, which is community.
Yeah.
And I know when I transition, I noticed that when it's time for me to go, that nothing will collapse, because the ideology and philosophy that I teach will be carried on. Because I meet people in the street all the time, walk up to me and say, Brother Chisom, I just went to the Undoing Racism workshop. You ought to go check it out. So when I hear that, I know the word is out there. Because some people, when one leader is in charge, and everybody depends on him or one organization, and they lose their infrastructure, everything collapses. That's a dependency model. We need to leave from that to that process of being interdependent.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Listen, y'all better hype that up. So, Grandpa Ron, Dr. Ron Chisom, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you for just showing me love and support.
No, that's music. We're in this together, Chantel. I hope you keep doing it regular. I hope you're able to utilize this space because you're in a good space, and I hope more folks from the community that we know, that I know just myself, could help to be a part of this. Because we need to know about their local work as well. And I know that's what this group does here. So.
Yes. Well, I hope so too. So if you want to help, please, Chantel Speaks, hit me up. Chantel_speaks on Instagram. I will give out my number because, sometimes I DGAF, if you know what that means. But you can find me, Chantel Speaks, Chantel_speaks on Instagram. Please subscribe to our channel, Help Heal Happy on YouTube. And Dr. Ron, do you want to say any last parting words?
No, I want to thank Dawa.
Dawa, yes.
Dawa for letting this happen, and
thank you so much.
And this work is definitely needed here because we don't get a lot of ways to talk about what we do in a real way, that in a real meaning way, and it's not always cut off in 2 minutes kind of a thing. So I was just glad to be here. I'm glad that when I came here, I didn't really know this where you were bringing us to. But when we walked in here, we could feel it, the difference. So thank this organization.
Kidada. Yeah. Appreciate them being here. They didn't even know what was going on. But it's God's, like I said, this is all God. This is why Chantel Speaks is a faith-based podcast, because I try to let I'm human, but I try to allow the Holy Spirit to move. And he did that today. We can never forget
that spiritual base, for all of us, Yeah. That's what's going to get us through all of this anyway. But we got to do our work with the Spirit.
Yes.
We got to do both of them, So, So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Like I said, like and comment, share, subscribe to our channel, Help Heal Happy, and check out People's Institute for Survival and Beyond, PISAB.org. Yeah. If you want to have the Undoing Racism in your city, please check them out.
It's a 2.5-day workshop.
Yes.
Where we explain racism, we define racism, but we do it in the context about how to be effective organizers for social change. And we do this with a lot of young people. The work is intergenerational.
Right.
Our young people got to be in this movement right now. We can't be them versus us.
Yeah.
So, and we really mean that.
Right.
And if anybody interested in coming to the workshop, there's enough local people here that you can contact. We do it here. We do it throughout the state of Texas. But we do it all over the world. And right now, we thought they would cut our work back, but we're getting more calls now, even more so right now,
Right,
and,
right.
So
it's crazy.
We're excited about that. So thank you, Chantel, for having me.
Thank you so much.
All right.
All right, y'all. See y'all next time. Later.
Hope